Hello, on to Forest Focus as Nottingham Forest slipped to 7th in the Premier League after their 3-0 defeat to Arsenal, a second deserved loss in a row for the Reds. Where did it go wrong at the Emirates? How much was the absence of key players a factor? And what questions does it leave Nuno? Joining me to discuss that and a little bit more is, first of all, Michael Temple. Temps, good morning. How are you doing?
Morning, Matt. Good, thank you.
Good to have you with us. Pete Blackburn, stepping into the breach. How are you?
Yeah, good. Always nice to be your second choice, Matt.
Probably third choice.
Just
It was supposed to be Greg, but having also backed out of the Football Content Awards, he's backed out of this, but for good reasons around work. So we'll hopefully have Greg back on soon. Reds legend Garry Birtles, morning. How are you?
Yeah, very good, thank you. Can I just say something before we carry on there? You just said Forest have slipped to 7th position in the Premier League before a ball was kicked. Would have been delighted to hear that.
That's the spirit. That's what we like.
Goodness me.
We'll get back to that. Don't worry. We'll get back to that. But we'll talk about Arsenal first, where it went wrong, like I say, reflect on that defeat and look ahead to Ipswich, who looked pretty decent, I must admit, yesterday. So we'll have some chat around that. Pete, kick us off if you want. Just general thoughts on what you saw, and then we'll get into some specifics.
Well, I think the first point I want to say before I say anything else is I think we need to have some perspective about this because it's easy to get very knee-jerk, isn't it? And Gary's sort of just gone into that and touched on it, I guess. That's the first time we've gone away this season and put in a particularly stinking performance. We've been very good up to this point. But on the game, it just felt very, very passive. It just didn't feel like the Nottingham Forest that we've got used to this season. Real lack of intensity, and I think the goals characterise that. Very different to the normal us. We don't usually give teams space to shoot, and we tend to be right on our toes, fighting for everything. It just felt like there was real sort of spark missing from the very first moment, and that carried on through the game. And I think we were totally outclassed, and we're going to have to be an awful lot better next time out, even against a team that is at the other end of the table. So bad day at the office, but it's been a brilliant season so far. So let's not overreact.
What about you, Temps? What do you make of it? And also, how much of it is down to, no Gibbs-White, no Anderson, Chris Wood not able to start? How much of a factor is that, or is that giving them an excuse?
I'd have picked Chris Wood, and if the other players were fit, I think they would have played as well. But we were beaten by a better side. And I think what we're starting to see now is with this more progressive style and matching up with two centre-halves and giving more license to the wingers, does lead to these one-on-one battles. And we lost a couple of key one-on-one battles. Saka had Marino on toast all afternoon, and Martin Odegaard ran the game with very little to get in his way in central midfield. So that is a consequence of the way that we're playing now. We're not going to these places trying to steal a point. We're being a little bit more adventurous. And if you're even slightly off your game, you get turned over by squads that have the qualities the Arsenal squad has, even with the likes of Declan Rice left on the bench. So I've got no complaints in that sense. We are humbled a little bit. I think we're starting to see that what we are is a 50-55 point Premier League team, rock solid mid-table. We're not challenging that top 6 in the immediate term. But I am disappointed with the performance because we are capable of doing so much more, and I expect that to come through over the next few weeks.
Is that a disappointment, Garry, reflecting on, I guess, the goals? I know you hate discussing avoidable goals. We haven't had to do it much this season.
3 were avoidable. I'm sorry. That wasn't brilliant play. It looked like it. People will say it was from Saka. But how many opportunities did we have? We had 3 players who never got a touch in. They just let him waltz across the box. It wasn't like he was going one-on-one towards them with their back to goal. He was going across goal. And it was just so simple. And the amount of time and space they got for their 3 goals. What are the main things you tell your kids when you're there playing football? Close things down quickly. Don't let them shoot. Brian Clough always used to say, stop the cross. Don't let it get in your box. And that's it. It's just basics. And we just didn't do the basics. Simple as that. We're talking about getting beat 3 at Arsenal. Look at Man City getting beat 4-0 at home. They've lost 5 on the trot. So it happens to the best of teams. But I just hate avoidable goals, and all 3 of those could have been stopped without a doubt. We didn't get a foot in for the first. The second one, the amount of space he got across the ball for the tap-in, and it was a great strike from their guy for the second goal. But again, I could have lit up a cigar, smoked it, and stubbed it out before it was just ridiculous. The amount of time they got to get that shot away. And when they look at that, when they pick through all the pieces, I'm sure Nuno will be absolutely furious at the way we conceded them.
Let's focus on the goals a little bit. We'll get them out of the way in a bit more detail. I guess there's themes around them all, Pete, when you think about them. Gary's discussed there. The first one, what have you got? You've got to get tight to Saka, I guess, haven't you? Someone's got to make more of an angle to stop that shot, because I don't know. I guess, did Ward-Prowse think he was shepherding him away from goal and it was all okay? But he's got to get closer, I guess, hasn't he?
I think so. I mean, I think the first goal, it demonstrates obviously what Saka and Odegaard do well. I mean, Odegaard he has the initial shot before the actual goal, and I think, a bit unlucky to get that blocked. I think that would have had Sells sort of scrambling, and then obviously he drifts into that space well, and there's that lovely little sort of 1-2 of him and Saka. But after that point, it just looks like we're playing in a sort of cup tie, and we're a team from a division or two below. They sort of ghost past us, and I think I can only think it's that sort of intensity that we're talking about. That nobody gets near to Saka, nobody gets tight enough. I mean, Ward-Prowse trying to keep up with him and sort of shepherding across with his tangling legs just looked like it was disastrous. He was miles off it. Obviously a great finish in the end, and I personally don't think there's much you can expect the goalkeeper to do about it from that sort of distance with such a good strike, and it's pretty blind. But yeah, I think it's a theme through the game, and I think it was a theme from the very offset that we just didn't look remotely up to it in terms of the sort of intent we were defending with. Because that goal, I mean, there were plenty of warning signs for the goal, weren't there? I think there were several occasions, including obviously one that was ruled out, where it was a similar story. We were letting them drift past us and getting shots off. It just didn't look at all like the Nottingham Forest that we're used to seeing of late. Usually you'd expect us to be flying into those moments, tight to them. We don't let teams get off those easy opportunities. Usually teams have to work really hard to score against us, and they just didn't have to. Clearly brilliant footballers doing good things, but just didn't seem like our defenders were a factor in those goals.
No, I agree. I think as well, like midfield, Pat mentions midfield as non-existent. Probably was a big factor in the root cause, and we'll come on to that, but we'll stick with the goals. Second one, I've got a still here that we can discuss about how it ends up with Partey. I mean, what was your read on it, Temps? And I'll ask Gary about what we do better. This is how we end up just before the ball is played back to Partey to score.
It's quite apparent there, the pattern that Arsenal play against a team that's camping. So they know they're going to be denied space in the box. So they have a series of ball players in and around the edge of the box. And Odegaard and Saka are very, very good at delaying the pass and maximising the space that those players are going to have. I think they did that time and time again at the weekend. But what you see here is ultimately James Ward-Prowse is going to come out and try to block Thomas Partey. But his position there is nonsensical. You've got centre-halves marking. You've got Murillo, who's going to cut out any low ball into the mixer. And beyond that, we're man for man. Ward-Prowse, for me, needs to be higher, a bit more pressing to Martinelli. And I think it's the Italian, isn't it, to his left there. His position is poor. I don't think James Ward-Prowse in general showed too many defensive qualities at the weekend. I wasn't concerned when he was selected because the poor decision at Chelsea aside, he has been a very, very organised, disciplined, positionally aware impact for Forest this season. But this is poor here. And I think the second thing is the way that Yacey gets dragged by Odegaard. And then we all know what happens 3 seconds after this still. So those are the mistakes that will be being analysed. Ward-Prowse trying to do a centre-half job at this point, and it costs him of the quality that Thomas Partey has in this particular finish.
So I'll just put the still on screen. You've got Yates goes with Odegaard, which I think is the right thing to do. Dominguez and Marino are doubled up on Saka, and Ward-Prowse is just in front of the centre-half. So that's the situation. What's your take on it, Gary?
Well, I look at the man on the ball. He's always the most dangerous player. You have to, dispossess, close down. It's 4-on-2 there. 4-on-2, and they've got 2 outside the box with 10 yards of space. And I don't know who that is on the edge of the box, who's just standing there watching what's going on.
Jota's on the edge of the centre circle. Ward-Prowse is in the top corner.
Yeah. So, and everything's all right in the box. It's very tight there. But how can you have 4-on-2 with the man on the ball and then those two free? That is totally and utterly wrong. Yes, go to the man on the ball, but you don't need 4-on-2.
And if you are going to shadow Saka like that, do you have to get tight to get a foot in on him?
Yeah, but don't give him too much respect. Yes, he's a very good player, but don't over-respect him. I was always told, respect your opposition, but don't fear them. And I think sometimes it's drummed into players a little bit too much. Saka's this, Saka's that. But their form before this game, Arsenal, was pretty dire as well. They've been falling off, the pace a little bit as well. And, they found it so easy to just dismantle us. And that was the disappointing thing. Because they weren't in very good form, it was a time where we could maybe have gone there and got something out of it. I mean, last season, we played well at Arsenal. But this, when you see that still, it's just a nightmare for a coach when he can see that. Sometimes you get dragged towards the ball too easily. And that's what happens there, look. There's, you could throw a net over the 4 Forest players there. It's just, it's poor defending, to say the least.
And just lastly on that one, we're getting right into the details here. I wonder, Pete, if Morgan, Gibbs-White or Elliot on the pitch playing as a more advanced midfielder, maybe are they closer to party than Ward-Prowse, who's playing probably, arguably Yates was our most advanced midfielder on Saturday, which I thought was a bit strange, but it feels like maybe Morgan's closer or Anderson's closer to party when the ball's set back to him.
Oh, it's an insane hypothetical, isn't it? I think it's true. I think it's true to say that historically, when Gibbs-White has played in that role, he's been very good at picking up the sort of deepest midfield player for the opposition and shutting off the playmaker and such like. So I think there's a good chance that you might be in a better situation there. But it was pretty clear that the whole team had an off day. I don't think anyone really escapes that. So whether that would have dragged him down as well, I don't know. I mean, that still, I think, is just so much wrong with it. And we haven't even talked about this. There's a spare man at the back post as well. So if that ends up being a different ball, you could be in trouble in an entirely different way. I just think we were absolutely miles off it. And this is one of several very good examples of that. And like I say, I think there were maybe 5 or 6 other moments where Arsenal didn't get the goal because the finish wasn't quite right, or Sells makes a save, or there's a block. But each of those could have been the same sort of analysis where you froze the screen and it all just looked very messy.
But I can't see anybody there commanding that area and pointing and saying, you've got to close down. Let's get out a bit. They're a bit deep as well. You want leadership out there. And it doesn't look like anybody's shouting or pointing or saying, this is not right. You have to have leaders out there. I mean, I remember the back end of my career at Grimsby playing with a lad called Paul Futcher at centre half, and the two of us were always pointing and telling the younger lads, what to do, where to go, and get out. But it doesn't seem like there's anything going on there that people are seeing something that's dangerous and pointing it out to a colleague.
Just lastly on it, Gary, Danny's in the chat, a good lad, watches and plays a lot of football. He thinks Ryan Yates should pass Odegaard onto Murillo, who's the nearest centre half there. I still think Yates did the right thing. What do you think? What should Yates do there when he's tracking Odegaard, who's nearest to Saka?
Well, somebody's got to do it, obviously. But like I say, there's no leadership out there. Somebody should be saying, I've got this, but it doesn't look like there is anything out there. They're all just ball watching, and it's a little bit static. They're a bit, statuesque, and it's just not very good defended, to say the least. And when you're playing against players of that quality, you can't allow them that time and space because they will punish you.
Excellent. Right, we've really gone into detail. We don't normally go into that much detail, but I thought it probably summed up a lot of the performance. That's why I went on that one. 3rd goal attempts. Forest weren't happy with a quick restart. The ball hits the ref. I think it was Simon Hooper, wasn't it? It's played quickly. Waneri, who's a really good player, breaks through forward. And again, are we just switched off there? Because he again, we'll come on to Ward-Prowse, but he was closest to him when the shot's taken, and he wasn't that close to him in the end. Is it just not being switched on?
Waneri looks dangerous, isn't he? I'm interested to see how he develops. There's no room to say you're not ready. This is Premier League football. You have to be. So that doesn't wash with me. And I think it was just symptomatic of that lack of sharpness, and probably realising at that point where the game's long dead, there's very little we could do. And that spark never came. I don't necessarily think we even had that spell, that 5-10 minutes where there's a bit of hope for an underdog in a game like this. I'm crediting Arsenal. I didn't talk on the Saka goal. He did so well there. And you could construct a case to say Marino's actually had a torrid afternoon, but he's pushed him away from goal there. It's a lackluster block from Ward-Prowse. Milenkovic, in my book, makes a good decision to fly out of the line and try and block as well. And he hasn't stanched it, but he's just surprised everybody by shooting back across his body rather than finding the top left corner. But the game was long dead by the time the third goal went in. We can't be proud of our efforts in trying to stop it, but not ready is no excuse in the Premier League.
No, but the thing is now 6 goals in the last 2 games we've conceded, which is not acceptable, is it? I mean, yeah, Newcastle and Arsenal, but we went to Anfield and won 1-0. Didn't concede at Anfield, and we're still the only team who've beaten Liverpool this season. So, we are doing things right at times, and we praise the team when they're doing the right things, but you have to question things when they're not doing the right things. And I think the Newcastle game as well, there were probably avoidable goals there as well. We backed off for the shots for one of the goals, I remember. I'm not just saying this now. I said it before the Newcastle game, after the Fulham game. Why don't we go back to try 3 at the back? So we got, that stability, and we've got that pace from, the fullbacks or the wing backs going forward. And then with the, the quality we've got in the final third, I think it's about time we just tried that again.
I think his 3 at the back debate is dead because he thinks he's got the right blend in central midfield. And what's hammered him here is the complete lack of any choice to make in the personnel he puts in that 3. So the blend of Ward-Prowse, Yates and Dominguez isn't right for any situation, but it's the hand that's been forced upon him. I think the reason that he's against playing 3 centre-halves in general is because his stockpile of talent and options generally is central midfield. That's what he's planned all week. And I wouldn't mind betting it's been quite late in the day that he's had that inability to start Morgan Gibbs-White or Elliot Anderson. And then the knock-on effect of wing-backs plus wingers and how he gets folk on the pitch. I don't mind that. I think we can be a more progressive side, and there is a way of being defensively solid and progressive with the profile of fullbacks we have with a back 4. But I don't think at any stage this season he envisaged deploying those 3 central midfielders together, and it really cost us against Arsenal.
But I think when you got to take each individual game as it comes, and because we conceded 3 against Newcastle in not very good fashion, I think it would have been good to go to Arsenal at that particular point and maybe just played with 3 at the back, bring Bolly in, and just stabilise things a little bit and see if we get something out of it in that respect. And I'd rather do that and then go back to a 4. Rather just be tighter than we were, because we just got ripped apart there so easily.
Yeah, we'll pull up that 3 at the back thread with Pete because he wanted to play 3 at the back in this game, and I want to talk more about midfield as well. Just before that, a quick word for the Trent navigation. After the game against Ipswich, there is Birtles' Dub Club gig. Here is a 14-second clip so you can see what you're going to get from it. What more could you want from life than 14 seconds of Beatles dubstep? That's from Glastonbury, by the way. Free entry straight after the game, after the Ipswich game on Saturday. So get down for that one. And also Paul McGregor's band, I think they're called The Upper Body, is playing after the Villa game as well. So it's a couple of good events coming up at the NAV. Right, lots to get through. So let's get back into it. 3 at the back, Pete. You wanted to play 3 at the back in this game. I wanted to play 3 at the back at half time. And one of the questions was, should Nuno have done more to deal with Saka and Odegaard? He loves leaving players one-on-one and trusting them, but they were getting absolutely murdered. So kind of 2 questions. Should we have gone 3 at the back to deal with Saka and Odegaard a little bit more? Or if not, what else could we have done to try and mitigate the damage they were doing?
Well, I can see both sides of it. Firstly, because if you take the Liverpool away game, Nuno trusted players to do those jobs one-on-one, like Moreno against Salah, and we came out talking about how we matched them in those departments and won those duels with Aina on the other side as well. And we've seen similar to that against Chelsea and Brighton, where players have been trusted and it's worked out well. I said before the game I would have played that back three with the box four in midfield, but it's all well and good me sort of crowing about how I would have done something differently and it would have been better. But in reality, that system, I picked that because I'd hoped that Anderson and Gibbs-White were both fit and they could both play in those sort of advanced 8 or number 10 roles, giving us that real energy and numbers in the centre of the park. I'd hoped that it would mean that there was a plan in place with a left centre-back, a left wing-back and Dominguez in that left centre-mid role to have numbers and energy to cope with Saka and Odegaard linking up, because I think anyone who's seen Arsenal play with them both there knows that is the sort of athletic and creative powerhouse of this Arsenal team. That's where the real threat comes from, the real damage. And you said in the preview that Salah's goal contributions are double anybody else's for Arsenal. Saka, for Arsenal this season. So it was pretty clear to me that was the worry and what I would have been thinking about. But then Nuno had a pretty tough hand to play with. To be fair to him, didn't he? If he's made the assumption that Chris Wood isn't fit enough to play from the first minute, and we can obviously debate that, but I haven't I don't have any information. Yeah, well, you can. I mean, you won't be debating with me because I have no sort of feeling on the data that perhaps he's got or whatever is leading him to make that decision. I would have picked Wood before the game and said so in the preview episode, but I presume there's a good reason for why you did it. But he just didn't have the tools to play the way that I felt that we should do. Without Gibbs-White and Anderson, that is massive. And to be fair to Nuno and the team, any other side losing their creative fulcrum, their number 10, how long have Arsenal been whining on about having no Odegaard for a portion of this season? Well, we had no Gibbs-White and no Gibbs-White replacement. So, I mean, I think you have to bear that in mind. But I do think there was probably another way. I'm not sure how much Hudson-Odoi and Elanga are giving us in these sorts of games, to be honest, when I think there's always a balance for us to have between offering a threat ourselves and reacting to the opposition. But in this instance, I thought that the number one priority was being able to shut down the damage they could do to us and then work from there. And I don't think we got the balance right on the day.
Gary's back. Hang on, I'll add him back in.
I know when people phone you. Yeah, going back to that, commenting on the Chris Wood situation, we've had this argument before. What is the point when you've got your top scorer sat on his backside on the bench? If he's not fit to play, don't put him on the bench. If he's fit to play, start him and say, right, Chris, just give me an hour if you can. He might just get us a goal, but then he brings him on when we're losing. It was like the Newcastle game. He was warming up for 20, 25 minutes. And I said, 2-1 down. I said, you watch, we'll go 3-1 down and he'll bring him on. What happens? 3 minutes to go, he brings him on and we're 3-1 down. It's just not right. If you've got somebody on the bench and they're able to run and they're able to do things, Chris doesn't have to do a great deal. He doesn't have to go over the top or anything like that. He does what he does best. He scores goals in the box. And if you give him the right supply, he'll do it. But I never get that. Clough, you have to go back to Clough because he was a genius. And he would always say, right, give me an hour. If you're fit, give me an hour. And he said, I'll carry off if you're shattered. And that's where I don't get. What's the point in him sitting on his backside when he's our top scorer? Do you think Salah would do that at Liverpool? No. You think, sometimes obviously Haaland did because, when Man City were flying, they could have sometimes afforded to leave him out. But, it baffles you sometimes. If you've got him there, if he's fit to go out and start a game, he might have to come on. One, you could have got injured after 10 minutes and he'd have had to come on after 10 minutes. That could have been a possibility. So why not play him? Why not start him?
How did Taiwo do, Temps? There's loads I want to get through, so we'll probably move on. How did Taiwo do for you when you start?
Taiwo wasn't the problem in the game. I think there was a lack of service and creativity in the final third, which would have made it tough for Peak Alan Shearer to score in that game. So I'm not laying the blame at Taiwo's door. I would have started Chris Wood. I subscribe to what Garry says. Yes, he's had a nightmare of international travel. I don't think there's too many places further away on earth or less connected than New Zealand to Nottingham. But that said, he's been finding a way to score. And even in the games where the stats suggest it's going against the head, Chris Wood has come up, nicked one and grabbed the headline. So he starts for me. If he's turned up and said he's slightly sore, tired from the international games, whatever, as Garry said, no problem, Chris. Give me 45 minutes. We'll keep an eye on drag you if we need to. Taiwo had a couple of moments, didn't he, where he held the ball. He brought in the midfielders. He scrapped with centre halves, but he was so isolated that when we did try to target him, he found himself surrounded and quickly extinguished by the Arsenal hustle. So wasn't the problem in this game, but he's not the answer for us at the moment. Chris Wood is and needs to be restored to the 11 on Saturday, which he will be.
Right, let's move on to other bits and bobs from the game just quickly. Before we come on to move, one thing on Hudson-Odoi. Can you play Hudson-Odoi in away games against top teams, Pete, when he offers not that much defensively? Like, I don't know if he was told not to really help out with Saka and stay high or not, but it felt like his performance was he didn't have a great game. And can you carry him when he was effectively a passenger in this one where we go to big top clubs?
In a sense, I'm going to answer pretty much every question that you ask with the same response, I think, because I think this was about the entire team and nobody was on it. The performance was really poor. There's a massive lack of intent and intensity in the way we did anything. So I don't think it's about individual players. I think you can play Hudson-Odoi in a game like this if you've got a game plan to get at them on the counter, but it does rely on every single one of those players putting a massive shift in, and it's going to rely on getting a bit of luck in the moments where you need it, and also defending with the sort of character that we have done for the vast majority of this season, where we've just been able to shut teams out. And Milenkovic and Murillo have been, pretty unparalleled in terms of a centre-back partnership, and the fullbacks have been, incredibly impressive in big moments like they were against Liverpool, for example. To go back to that, so I think you can. I don't think it's a ridiculous thing to do. But I do think there are some questions about how open we're left when those wide players aren't having, a particularly good day. Neither of them, you'd say, are massively effective in terms of dropping deeper or tucking in and giving us, the other side of the sort of out of possession side of the game. So really we have to be our absolute best across the pitch in midfield, not overrun, and with that incredibly sturdy defence. But the problems elsewhere mean that I don't think we could have afforded those wide players at the weekend, because we were massively overrun in midfield, just as we were in a slightly different way against Newcastle. And also the defenders weren't having the sort of brilliant games where they're stopping the winger and stopping the cross and such like, or stopping them cutting in and getting the shot off. So yeah, I think there's a balancing act to be had. I think Arsenal were pretty good, but we really allowed that to happen, didn't we? So I think there may be some thoughts for Nuno to consider going back to that sort of solution he had before, where one of the wide players was an Anderson or a Dominguez, and they were sort of tucking in and doing a job and having a bit of a balance between numbers and also being able to carry a threat on the break. I think it's good for us to have that ambition. I think we should be a team that can go anywhere in this division now and cause problems and hopefully get a result. But I think with both of those wide players not offering an awful lot out of possession, and also then not really offering an awful lot when they do get the ball, or not being able to, it is a bit of a problem.
You can go back to the Fulham game, can't you? The home game, we played 4 central midfield players, and we just got no width. We hardly had a shot on target, I don't think. And there's been some strange decisions, and we deserved to lose that game. It wasn't a particularly good game, but we tried something different. We played 2 up front, and like I say, 4 central midfield players. Then brought the pace on of Elanga and Hudson-Odoi later on in the second half to try and get us back in the game. So we're trying different methods, but the last 2 games have been real eye openers and something that has got to be really addressed pretty quickly, because if we keep defending like that, we're going to keep conceding goals on a regular basis, which is a concern.
Good to have 250 people with us, by the way. Do us a favour and hit like if you haven't already. Be very much appreciated. I do think midfield temps was probably the root cause of our problems on Saturday. The easy solution is to pin it all on Ward-Prowse and say he had a stinker, which he did. But he also played at Liverpool and he played at Stamford Bridge until he got sent off. He was playing quite well. Is it more a case, or this is my opinion, the balance of the 3 doesn't work, and they're all a bit similar. And you probably do need. We don't have a Sangare type number 6, and we don't have a more advanced number 10, and that felt like a problem where they just did not gel as a 3 at all.
He had a bad game in an unfamiliar role, and I think where you see the best of James Ward-Prowse is that deep-lying ball player who can take it off the centre halves and bring others into play. It relies on him having minders with him, and I think it relies on him having another more creative player in the central midfield that can distract others and create that space for him. So that blend, let's say, for example, James Ward-Prowse, Morgan Gibbs-White and Yatesy, that feels like the right blend for James Ward-Prowse to be the best that he can be. When he's having to be defensively minded, because Yates is nominally in the 10 role, but we know there is really there to press what may have been Declan Rice, what turned out to be Thomas Partey, their deep-lying holding player. And as it transpired at times, to do a bit of a job tracking Martin Odegaard, that entire structure just dissipates. And you find James Ward-Prowse being used as a central defensive midfielder. And we've seen his failings in the Partey goal and the Saka goal. That's not his natural game. But we need someone to fulfill that role in that game, and he was incapable of doing it. So I do think he'll be a victim when team selection comes out for Ipswich. I'm not pinning it on him completely because he was a professional being asked to do a role which he couldn't quite fulfill. But from what I've seen with the sight tests in the games that he's played, he's found himself towards the bottom of the pecking order and got a start simply because Morgan Gibbs-White and Elliot Anderson couldn't. So I don't expect to see him asked to do that again. He was covering for absent players, and it kind of showed. The set piece delivery was still there. We didn't have much of it, but there was enough quality for me on the balls that he was whipping in. He just wasn't able to get going and found himself defensively lacking. He'll have a role to play in the right midfield blend. That wasn't it. That wasn't the game for him. And I think it'll cost him his place against Ipswich.
Yeah, I think so. Just one more thing on Morgan, Garry, before we move on from it. One of my questions was, and I said this in the post-match show, if he's going away with England and he's carrying an injury, which Nuno said pre-match, surely we should say to him, we'd love you to go, but you've got to stay here. And you're the only one on this panel who's actually been away on an England camp. So, should Forest have said that to him? I know it's a difficult one, but for me, he shouldn't have played for England if he's carrying an injury.
No, definitely not. Shouldn't be called up if he's got anything of an injury, any hint, because if you're being called up by your country, you want to be 100% fit to do yourself a justice. And I think when he's come on as sub for England, he's done particularly well. And I don't think he's got much credit from the pundits when they're talking about players who have been coming on and doing well. But yeah, it's a strange one, that, because if you've got any sort of niggle, then you should say, right, no, I'm not right for this. I don't want to go there and just make it worse. That's how it was done in those days. If you got slight hint of an injury, yes, you're desperate to play for your country, but you didn't want to go and cock it up, by being half fit. You want to get yourself back to 100% fitness, get yourself back in the team, and do it that way. So it was just a little bit of a weird one, that.
Just lastly, last player before we move on, Pete, I want you to discuss. Elanga's getting some hammer in the comments. He got a lot of flack online. Pete, I don't think he had a particularly good game. He did get injured after 23 minutes and then comes off at half time. Personally, I don't mind leaving him out against Ipswich at all for Jota, who's earned a start. But was Elanga a factor in this one particularly or not?
Not more so than anyone else, I don't think. I personally, I don't think that Elanga has been enough of a problem in recent weeks or months to justify the sort of abuse that he seems to be getting or the criticism. He's not been a player at the top of his game, not remotely. I think there are probably, it looks like he's a player that doesn't have the sort of burning confidence that you might hope, because he's not driving down the line and taking players on at will like we've seen him when he's at his best. I think there's probably a combination of things going on there. I guess a lot of teams aren't coming to players with, massive high lines like perhaps they were when we weren't the same sort of proposition. That teams are going to fear us a little bit more now. We're more competition for them. So I think generally speaking, it's going to be harder for him to make an impact when teams could play against us and don't necessarily look to just dominate in that way. I also think he's been a little bit unlucky on quite a few occasions, and I've said this every time we defend him. I've seen a fair few very good crosses from him that haven't been finished off. I think his set pieces have been really good, and I think if he gets a few more numbers in this sort of assist column or whatever, then people probably aren't talking about it in quite the same way. But there's no getting away from that. He's not at his best, and he doesn't look like quite the same player that he did, I guess, the sort of first half of last season, where he was just a constant threat, and I think teams were terrified of him. And he's still useful to have in the team quite often because he keeps teams honest, and he has that pace that is a threat regardless of whether someone's at the top of their game. Teams have to worry about it, and that teams will be preparing for him, and he'll be in the back of the mind of the defenders that are up against him. So I sort of feel protective, and I want to sort of stick up for him because I've seen some of the stuff that people were sending you after the show the other day, and I think it's so far wide of the mark to be really, gunning for him to be out of the team and never playing for us again and all that sort of nonsense. I think it's mad that Forest are in the position that we are. Going back to what Garry said at the very opening of the programme, we would have all have been absolutely desperate to bite your hand off for this. And we're still picking on players that, we feel like we need to be slagging off. And it is slagging off. It's not just maybe Jota Silva's a better option and he should come on. It is just like really unnecessary vitriol. So I don't get it personally. Don't think he's been at his best. I'd hope that the coaching staff can work on that because he's a real threat when he's at his best. But I don't really understand why he's getting the sort of abuse it is.
He had more assists until the real back end of the season than Morgan Gibbs-White, didn't he, Elanga?
Yeah, until the last few weeks. Yeah,
he
started.
He's capable of, and that's probably what people look at, saying, "Well, if he can do it last season, why is he not doing it this season?" Because teams know what he can do, and they'll close down, on that sort of player, and not allow him to, create the havoc he can do in that final third with his pace and his delivery.
Yeah, I think there's two things about it. Like he probably needs to use his pace a little bit more. That was one thing, whether that's confidence or coaching or what. He needs to exploit his biggest weapon. And the other thing is, he was very influential against West Ham. He got a red card. He didn't get a red card. He earned a red card. His set pieces were excellent. I also thought he was good against Leicester and not so good against Newcastle. He didn't have set pieces at Arsenal, and that takes a little string from his bow as well because Ward-Prowse was on the pitch. But I do think that it's a little unfair, the level of abuse he's taken. It feels like, and we've said this on the podcast before, there always has to be one player who is in the spotlight, and Yates is having a good season, so it's not him at the moment. It might be if he has another bad game, but yeah, I don't think Elanga's the problem. But like I say, I think Jota's earned a start or an opportunity on that one. Right, let's move on. We'll start with Temps. Weigh in on Elanga if you want, Temps, but just general, in terms of going back to the perspective that Pete referenced there and Garry referenced at the start of the show, what is your perspective now on what bracket of the table we actually are, having taken stock after these last two defeats?
We're going to finish with somewhere in the region of 50 to 55 points, which is good for circa 10th position in the Premier League. And I think that's a fair reflection of where we found ourselves. We've seen our potential in the early season form. We've seen our fragilities in the last two games. We know there are players that are going to come back into the side that are going to improve it. And we know we play Ipswich at home on Saturday, which is a game we'd like to expect to win. So quick maths, we've taken 19 points from 12 games, an outstanding return, even after the last two defeats. If we take 31 points from the remaining 26, that'll get us to 50. 36 from the remaining 26 gets us to 55. And you're in and around 10th position in the Premier League. What a journey we're on. We were bottom of the Championship not ever so long ago. We motored through that. Yes, we've clung on in those first two Premier League seasons, and now we find ourselves looking forward. So I'm really happy with the manager. I'm happy with the ownership. I'm happy with the group of players that we have. And the debates that we're having now are not around how we're going to keep a clean sheet and sneak a draw here and there. We're talking about how we're going to be progressive and kick on and score goals. And that leads to the debate around luxury players, which you could put Morgan Gibbs-White, Callum Hudson-Odoi and Anthony Elanga into that bracket. Luxury players are given a break. They're allowed to cheat. They don't have to necessarily track their runners because of the attacking threat that they carry. Anthony Elanga is one of, if not the fastest player in the Premier League. He's a weapon and he'll come good. He's had a couple of bad games, but if you take out those players from your side who can break a game in a moment, find a yard, play that ball, finish that goal, turn up at the back stick and nod one in, then you're not going to be a top 10 side in the Premier League. You have to take risk. You have to almost dare to lose, and you have to keep picking these players time and time and time again until they come good. Otherwise, we're reverting back to where we were not so long ago, picking a team that we think can camp for 85 minutes and sneak out a clean sheet. That's not where we are. That's not where we want to be. If we want to get over this precipice and get into 10th place and beyond, we have to keep faith with players like Anthony Elanga.
What about you, Gary, just in terms of the bigger picture?
The one worry for me still is strikers. I think January has got to be so important for us. I just hope there's a list of players, strikers that we have got our eyes on, because I think, we've seen, with Chris travelling all around the world, he came back. We think he should have played, but they didn't, they didn't fancy him to play. Awoniyi's not had, hardly any match time at all. He's been on the bench a lot. So I think, that is imperative that we fill a gap in that position in the January window.
What about you, Pete? I would bracket us 8th to 12th personally at the moment. I feel like that's roughly where we're at from what I've seen of all these games. What about you?
Well, I said in the pre-season prediction show that I could make a case for us finishing anywhere from 11th to 17th. I think that has moved upwards, and that's a pretty good place to be, right? As things stand, I think there's probably eight teams in the Premier League that are definitively better than us, that I don't think it's, really realistic over the course of a whole season for us to be challenging. So that's the table as it is, but with Newcastle and Villa overtaking us. I mean, that's a hell of a compliment given where we were at the start of this season, and that's not including the likes of Man United, who obviously have got riches and squad depth beyond anything that we should be expected to have at this point. So, I think anything beneath that top 8, if we can finish sort of there down to 12th or 13th, I still think that's a really positive season. It's going to be a massive fight, because that you're sort of writing off clubs that have got really, really good sides and do really exciting things, like a Bournemouth. You're forgetting that a West Ham might change a manager and suddenly surge at the table. I mean, their wage bill compared to ours will be enormous. And then we're thinking about teams like Fulham and Brentford, who've been at the level for much longer than us, have been established, and we're thinking there's a really good chance we can finish ahead of these teams. So the perspective is that one of those positions is a great place to finish. I think we've probably got maybe we got a little bit giddy because we're in 3rd place and then 5th place and all that sort of stuff. But it's looking like a really positive season. We've had a bit of a blip here, but I'm hopeful that we can finish somewhere between sort of 9th and 13th, and that will be, lots better than I thought it was going to be at the start of the season, when I still thought there was a very real chance we could get dragged into it with a bit of bad luck. So I think we just have to be, very positive and try and enjoy the journey.
I just want to touch on the Ipswich game and a couple of other bits before we go. Just for that, quick word for our second sponsors, Global Telemetrics, and another video to demonstrate some of the work that they do.
Late last week, our repatriations team took down another chop shop operation. The smart track device installed to our customer's Range Rover led our team to this location. Sadly, as the theft wasn't reported until sometime after it had been stolen, the Range Rover had already been partly dismantled. This is now the 3rd major chop shop operation shut down by our teams within a month.
There you go. More chop shop footage. Yes, this time of an absolutely hacked up Range Rover. So get a tracker, report the theft quickly, and you might retain it. If you get a tracker, by the way, through the link in our on the description for this episode, then there's a bit of commission in it for me. So do get it from there now if you're going to do that. So yeah, thank you, Global Telemetrics. What are you shaking your head for, Pete Blackburn?
Just your corporate hormongering, mate. I don't like it. It's outrageous. You've changed. I'm going to channel Fletch. You've changed, mate.
True. Right. A couple of things I want to get across. 15 minutes or so to go. Did any of you chaps, I should have asked this before, watch the Ipswich Man United game yesterday?
Yeah,
Temps is nodding.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, that's Temps this. I thought Ipswich were impressive. It showed to me that I think we can beat them, certainly, obviously, but we have to play to our levels. And then if we do, then I think, we win a very close game, very competitive game, hopefully. Is that how you would read it?
Yeah, definitely. There's players in that lineup that I like and respect, and the way they kept at Man United was impressive. Delap and Smodics are probably the headline grabbers, but and the goal was slightly lucky, right? It took a deflection over Onana's hand, but there's a spirit, there's an endeavour, there's a bit of never say die with Ipswich that I like, and they run themselves into the ground. So not a foregone conclusion. Nothing is. I think having watched the bottom six, Wolves had a bit of a spark, didn't they, the weekend? But Ipswich definitely have a bit of a pluckiness about them, and I think they've got more substance than Luton. They're already everybody's kind of second favourite team, and for me, the team I hope can pull themselves clear of that bottom three because of that. I like what Kieran McKenn's done. I like the setup and the manner in which they've gone from League One to the Premier League. And it was entertaining, wasn't it, to see Sky Sports just falling over themselves to have a love-in with Ed Sheeran in that little bit of post-match. So there's a nice story there. There's a plan. There's a backing of the manager. There's a nice feel around Ipswich Town. And I hope and expect them to just sneak out of that bottom three. But I do think we're better than them. And we should be targeting 3 points if we're going to get to my targeted bracket of 50 to 55.
Yeah, I think they're an impressive team.
Is they do the basics very well. They're a very good pressing team. They're not afraid to press high up against even the best teams. They put pressure on you. And, that's what we didn't do against Arsenal at the weekend. So, like you said, Tim, not a foregone conclusion. And strange results are coming. The Tottenham win at Man City. I mean, that's ridiculous. 4-1 for Wolves at Fulham, who we saw, beat us at the City ground. So, and Leicester haven't lost. I think they've only failed to score in one game this season, Leicester, against Man United, funnily enough. So getting beat by the odd goal at times. Apparently, they were denied a clear penalty against Chelsea at the weekend. So, yeah, it's no foregone conclusion that anybody's dead and buried at the moment.
And guys, no one saw a Liverpool procession coming. I think the pre-season debate was still Man City, Arsenal. So Premier League not as what's the word? Not as repetitive and formulaic as perhaps some people thought.
8 points clear, but this stage of the season, nobody saw that coming whatsoever.
Have you seen much of Delap, Gary? I was watching our WhatsApp chat yesterday. I would love us to sign Delap. I don't even think it's realistic, but Danny says, what would Delap cost? I mean, he'd probably cost you 40 million quid now. But have you seen much of him?
I haven't had a chance to see much of him, but you do read, you hear about him, and if he's scoring goals at that level, then you've got to be interested in him. Because he's obviously got something. Because that level is the hardest one in world football to score in, and he's doing it. But I think he's got a very good manager who backs him. I think his teammates know exactly what his strengths are. And, I think they're putting a great, show on for the Premier League. And 30,000 people were there, just over 30,000 people watching them at the weekend. It's not a bad showing. I think you're right, Temps. I think they've got a bit more about them than Luton. Luton was, I thought, superb last season. They could have stayed up, but just run out of steam. But Ipswich looked to be a little bit different.
Well, that certainly has, hasn't he? 'Cause he's got that skill and craft, but also he's physically impressive. He's explosive. There's top end pace. Carries the ball very, very well. Great recruitment. He had 3 Football League loans from Man City, and they've snatched him for 15 million, and he's worth triple that now, as Matt says, in this market. So come what may, Liam Delap will be in the Premier League next year.
You were nodding along on Delap there, Pete. He's just a powerful number 9, isn't he?
Oh, he looks like he's got a bit of everything, which is pretty impressive given he's not played football at this level. I think he's an example of just how well coached Ipswich are as well. Because I mean, if you followed EFL football, Liam Delap's loans weren't exactly explosive. This wasn't a guy that many people would have been expecting to come to take to the Premier League and take it by storm in the way that he is doing. It looked like a big old gamble to me, having watched him play at the level below. He was he was well fated in youth football and a player with obvious talent, but he never really sort of smashed it at championship level for a long period. But now he looks like someone who's got a bit of pace. As Temp says, he carries the ball really well. He's powerful. His finishing instincts seem really good, and he was blooming unlucky at the weekend not to get on the score sheet, thanks to some pretty impressive goalkeeping. But I think he's also a symbol of what Ipswich are. They are an extraordinarily well-coached football team. If you look at the players in that squad, there's no way that half of them should be playing at Premier League level, but because they're so well coached, they're all performing well above their levels in the sort of way that we saw with some players with Steve Cooper, I think. I think they're brilliant out of possession and they're very good in possession. But I actually think they present quite a good opportunity for us because they will try and play. They will be relatively high up the pitch. The wing backs will be advanced. You see that they get an awful lot of their joy from Davies and Burns or whoever it is in the team getting into sort of attacking positions. And if that's the opportunity for the likes of Elanga and Hudson-Odoi to make a real difference and start making their mark on the season. So I think it'd be a really good game. I think they can definitely hurt us, but I also think that we should be able to get back to our best against them all being well.
Yeah, we'll pick up on that much more on Thursday, obviously, but they're a good side and it'll be a tough game, certainly. Last topic, we mentioned Steve Cooper there. He was the talk of Twitter last night for Forest and Leicester after getting the bullet after 10 games in the Premier League and a couple in the Cup. They've got 12 points on the board, Garry. Harsh or not, do you think?
I think harsh, without a doubt. I think, there's a massive part of it is he was at Forest. It's an East Midlands thing, the Derby thing. If he'd have been at Derby, as manager there, I think that would have been exactly the same if it had happened. I don't think, from the first time he went there, that the Leicester fans were particularly happy because of his Forest connections. And like I say, I think they've only failed to score in one game. Vardy has been given, license to start games, and he's been scoring goals. They've not been getting beat very much. Chelsea at the weekend, they should have had a penalty. I was told, I didn't see it, but. It's. I mean, how many games? 12 games, for goodness sake. We saw what he did at Forest. He turned it down, turned it round, and he's capable of doing that. So very harsh indeed for me. Yeah,
I think so. I mean, I did watch that Chelsea game. They were very defensive. You wouldn't like to sit there and watch it. But when he was at Forest, we were defensive, but we were kind of thrilling on the counter attack. I remember. We had some great wins in the Premier League. Obviously, Leicester at home with Morgan releasing Brennan. Arsenal, we won on the counter. Brighton, we won on the counter. We beat Southampton. We played entertaining games. It wasn't. I can see why Leicester fans are annoyed with what they're witnessing, but they weren't having him from the start, like Garry says. I would point the finger as equally at the players, having read some pieces. I mean, they sound like they've got some egos that need putting in check, and also the board. Like, did they not realise who they were appointing? Like 10 games ago? And the remit is to stay in the Premier League, and they've got 12 points on the board. So, yeah, they knew what football they were getting. I would be pointing the finger much more at Leicester's ownership for that. And I will absolutely love it if they get relegated because, players like Vestergaard, who seem very easy to fall out with, and others like that. And dare I say, a slightly entitled fan base as well, in my opinion. Pete, what about you?
I think it was a really, really bad decision for him to go there and for them to appoint him because I've no idea why a club who had just got rid of a manager like Enzo Maresca decided to go with a manager like Steve Cooper with this squad that they developed, particularly for one guy who plays a very distinct type of football, to then appoint someone who plays in an entirely different way. And I also thought the fans never gave him a chance and were against him from the very first minute and very vocal about that. It doesn't sound like the players have covered themselves in much glory either. It just seems like a right old mess all round. I think you're totally right in your analysis. I think it's on the owners for making what seemed like a silly decision at the time to me. I wish he hadn't gone there as well, to be honest, because I just didn't see how it could ever work out. But I guess someone with his sort of ability and his mindset would never think like that. I think they've got massive delusions of grandeur if they think they should be anywhere above 16th in the table. I think they're above where they should be as a squad. And to talk about that Chelsea game, I mean, it's all right talking about them not having much attacking threat, but their best attacking player, Buonanotte, was out, suspended. And then they've just had the other sort of bright spark, Fatawi, ruled out for the season. I've no idea what they were expecting. I think it was just, a real sort of show of madness all around, to be honest. And, at least Coops' bank account's going to be looking pretty lively this morning, I imagine. And that'll give him a nice bit of time to decide what he wants to do next. But I hope he gets a sort of better opportunity with a better environment next time around, because I absolutely love the guy for everything that he did for us.
Yeah, that's another headline, is that Leicester squad is not very good. He doesn't have a Brennan type or a Gibbs-White type, and he's got Wout Fast playing at the back. So I don't know, again, what they expected. Same question, Temps, but also more of a kicking it on. What next for Cooper, do you think?
Next for Steve Cooper is a job in the Championship where he gets a squad of hungry young players, maybe adds a couple in the low market and repeats the trick that he did with Forest, because that's his strength. Walking into an aging, relatively poor Leicester City squad and trying to fulfill their delusional vision is what's cost him his job. And you just ask yourself this: is changing manager going to improve the fortunes of that Leicester squad, or are they achieving par for the players they've got in there? I've just watched Wout Faes have 4 opportunities to clear a ball and be tippy-tapping around trying to do kick-ups and overhead kicks on the edge of his box. 4 weeks ago, I watched Chris Wood absolutely bully him and tip one in over the keeper. He's not, how he gets in that Belgian side, I'll never know. He looks like a poor Championship defender. He's not physically impressive. He doesn't make risky passes. There's just nothing about that particular player that screams you're going to be anywhere than the bottom 5 in the Premier League. And I'm not meaning to pile in on him, but that is symptomatic of what they've got, where they are, where they should be, and where they feel they need to be next. Every empathy, every sympathy for Steve Cooper. He'll pop up again in the Championship. I don't think he'll get another job where he walks into a Premier League side, but he'll improve that club. The club that he walks into in the Championship, he'll improve. He'll make them better. And I think Leicester will finish in and around where they are now. They've got a scrap on this season.
And they'll go down.
Yeah, I think they'll go down. And I think you're right about Cooper. Few people saying Coventry in the chat. Somewhere like that where they've got good ball players, because Cooper does need to prove a point that he can play good football, because we did in the Championship and we did at the start of the Premier League, and then we were much more pragmatic. And there's the other thing about Cooper is my gripe is, like, there's a section of our fan base that's insanely revisionist that seems to have forgotten that he kept us up in the Premier League when we should have gone down with 30 signings, 30 injuries, whatever it was, second worst injury record. That was a big gamble that first season, signing those players, and I don't think too many of them had relegation wage clauses where the cash went down. So, yeah, we owe Steve Cooper a lot. He went at the right time. It wasn't working, and I wish him every success, and I wish Leicester every failure. There you go. Right. Anything you want to add, Gary, before we depart?
No. I think we've touched on everything we need to touch on at the moment. I think Nuno has probably just got to get his best team in his mind when everybody's fit. And I'm sure he'll do that, when obviously Anderson and Gibbs-White are back to normal, then it will be totally different. But I think when you've got key players out, you've got to rethink things a little bit and maybe try a different system just to accommodate the players you've got who are fit. So that's the only thing I can say.
Excellent. I was going to say as well, thank you to everyone who voted for us in the Football Content Awards. We got nowhere, but we had a lovely evening in the company of Pete, Temps, and Paul, who's in the chat today. Paul Morley came down with us. It was very good fun. Temps, somehow I shared an Airbnb with Temps, and we ended up having a Turkish takeaway at 1 a.m., which was entirely your idea, Temps. So thank you for paying for that.
I used to live in North London. It's some of the greatest Turkish takeaways in the world. So hopefully I've exceeded your expectation of what a kebab can be.
It was wonderful. Wonderful. And a very nice Airbnb. Had a lovely time. Pete, did you buy...
For it, Matt.
Did you buy a frozen pizza at 1 a.m. as well, Pete?
I found a frozen pizza a long way buried beneath some ice in an incredibly dodgy newsagents at 1 a.m. and that was about as good as it got for me. I think I preferred the kebabs, especially if Temps was paying for them, and presumably they're going through the Trent Bridge expenses system.
1 a.m. We left at 10. Where had you been? What did you get up to?
We were talking to some Swedish fella who invited us to stay with him in Gothenburg about 10 p.m. after you crashed the stage for the award winners' photos. You and Paul did on there with your gold award that we never won. So, yeah, there you go. There you go. Right. Lovely evening was had by all. We'll be back on Wednesday with, I think, Tom Colomossi from the Daily Mail, and assuming he isn't now distracted with Leicester City stuff, but he's the Midlands football writer. So we'll come on and chat a lot of Forest, and we'll touch on a little bit of Midlands football in general. Thursday is Ipswich match preview, and then we'll have the opposition preview on Friday. And then the post-match show a little later because I'm going to the game with my daughter, so hopefully she gets to see a win. If you have enjoyed this, do us a favor, hit like, hit subscribe. You can become a channel member or sign up for Patreon and give us a lovely review on iTunes and Spotify. Garry Birtles, thank you very much.
Absolute pleasure, as always.
It was. We covered an absolute ton of ground there, a lot of dipping into lots of topics and probably covering none of them properly, but hopefully people enjoyed that. Michael Temple, thank you very much.
Cheers, fellas. See you soon.
Well, on your correct laptop, hopefully next time.
Yeah, fingers crossed I'll be reunited with my laptop at some point in the next 48 hours.
Hopefully so. Hopefully so. Pete Blackburn, hero of the hour, stepping in at an hour's notice with no prep. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for having me. Always enjoyed it. Much appreciated.
Yeah, very much enjoyed it. Have a good day, everyone. If we don't see you on Wednesday, then hopefully we shall see you soon.